Do you want to have a better life regardless of how high or low your anxiety is? Then watch this video for 7 tips that's going to help you. Hopefully, by now, you've been practicing a lot of exposure. You've been really learning how to move through your anxiety based on my last video that I went through that. But I really want to talk about this concept in this video about now you've gone through all these different skills and moving through your anxiety. And these are tips that I want you to keep in mind moving forward, right? Kind of like more of a maintenance or things that you just want to be aware of because maybe your anxiety will start to creep up again and then you might get really stuck again. First tip is focus on continual committed actions, right? So last week I talked about the concept of exposure, but ultimately committed actions, it's more than just exposing yourself to situations in the purpose of moving through your anxiety. Sometimes I'll talk about this concept of committed actions, which is this concept in acceptance and commitment therapy, where we want to constantly focus on what actions are going to move you closer to the life you want to have, right? A value-driven life. So we want to think about what are the actions you could do in the next week, 2 weeks, month, years, but even in the next day, the next couple hours. So that's really where you want to kind of focus your attention on. What are going to be the continual actions that I can do that are going to move me closer to the life that I want to have? And again, this is kind of more of that focus on these very specific goals, but I want you to tie these to your values, right? So if your value is being a loving partner, right? What are the actual committed actions that would look like today? Today, that would look like I'm going to go cook dinner for my partner, even though I'm really tired, but I'm going to cook dinner and then I want to sit down and really try to be open and have a conversation. And even though maybe I want to pick up my phone and get distracted, I'm going to try as much as possible to really focus in on our conversation. That's what a committed action of being a loving partner would look like today, in the day in and day out. Committed actions when it comes to your anxiety, that's what I want you to continually think about. Again, where were the places in your life where your anxiety was keeping you stuck? So what would be the actions that I have to continually kind of challenge myself to face or confront or just continue to do rather than maybe defaulting to some avoidance strategies? The second one is to really plan for barriers or life just lifing hard. So what do I mean by that? Right. So part of the focus in this moving through your anxiety, again, is getting you to have different skills and putting yourself in situations because it's important to you. But I also want you to plan for barriers, and barriers can be internal barriers. So thinking through, again, what are the thoughts and feelings that are most likely going to get you stuck, or barriers in terms of if a situation did not turn out, the outcome was different than what you expected it to be. So you worked through this like exposure ladder and then you got to this point where you're running a meeting and then it doesn't turn out really well, or you think it was like you really bombed. So now you want to think through that barrier. If that happens, like how can you move through that and how can you not let that like lose steam? Of course, it's normal that you're going to feel sad and bummed, and making room for that and validating because you're human and that's normal, but also planning through those barriers. How are you going to keep moving forward? Tip number 3, it's really being aware of your overall pattern when it comes to avoidance, control strategies, safety behaviors. So we've talked a lot in this series about how to move through, deal with your anxiety when it's really important to you so that it doesn't keep your life really small. What I also want you to think about, like, I don't want you to have this hyper awareness of like every single time you avoid or every single time you do a control strategy or every single time you do a safety behavior, because one, you're human, so you're going to do them. We all do them. I do them all the time. And 2, it's going to be unworkable if you're like hyper aware of every single time and you try to tackle each one. But what I do want you to have is I want you to have an awareness of your overall pattern, right? Like, oh, okay, I said no to one social invitation, no big deal. A month later, it's like, oh, actually, now that I look about it, I've actually said no to like 4 events every single week and I haven't gone out. Okay, what's driving that, right? So I want you to first recognize that pattern, and then I want you to get really curious about that, like what's driving this. Of course, like I said, we all avoid sometimes, so that's fine. But like, is there an overall pattern where your avoidance strategy is starting to take over again, which might not be helpful because then that means your anxiety might start to kind of take over your life again. And also looking at what's the intention, right? So maybe you said no to one of those social events, not really based on anxiety, but you said no because you were really tired and exhausted and you wanted time to recharge. Okay, then that's fine. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you are the judge of that. So you get to decide when is it something that you have to kind of really, again, look at practicing some of these skills, putting yourself, doing more of those committed actions like I talked about, or when is it you just like acknowledge it and let it be and it's fine. Tip number 4 is this reminder: don't get too caught up in what your mind is saying. especially your anxious thoughts. Again, we've talked about another video of learning how to respond differently to your thoughts. But what's really important is because we are constantly dominated by what's going on in our mind, right? So it's like we're constantly in this thought machine and whatever we're thinking. And sometimes we have a hard time acknowledging and noticing what's happening for us because we're literally like swimming in this pool of language and words and we're constantly in it. And sometimes when we're like swimming in this pool of language, I just want you to come up for air, right? I just want you to notice what's happening here. Like, oh, okay, there's that thought that I'm going to fail. Oh, there's that thought that I can't make a new friend. Oh, there's that thought that I'm going to have a panic attack. Like, I just want you to notice these thoughts. And then I want you just to be aware of if you follow that thought, like how helpful is it going to be for you? Is it going to move you towards the life you want or not? Comment below what would be a good reminder for you to kind of periodically come up for air, what you could say to yourself or how you would explain that concept. And then take a sticky and write it on the sticky, right? Write this down on a sticky because I want you to have this front and center. Tip number 5 is really practicing how to be with your internal experiences. Again, so how do we do that? Notice what's happening for yourself, right? So notice, describe the internal experiences. I'm having these thoughts. I'm having these physical sensations. I'm having these feelings. I'm having a memory of, right? Just noticing and labeling. And then make a decision to be open, to lean into your experience. Like, can you just lean in a little bit? Can you turn on that willingness switch and be with your experience? And then as much as possible, try to kind of be in that space. So breathe through it, just be with it, allow that wave to come and go, and then come back to your present moment, right? So I'm not saying you have to hang out here in this extended period of time, but I just want you again to practice this skill of openness, of willingness, especially when your anxiety is again convincing you that you can't be there. The 6th tip is really about embracing kind of kindness or self-compassion with yourself, because regardless of what your journey with anxiety looks like, how long or short this journey is, it's very clear that being human also means that you're going to deal with difficulties in your life. And so wouldn't it be nice to have a foundation of secure and stable connection of love with yourself? Because at the end of the day, that's your longest relationship. So when you're having a hard time, don't you want to be able to turn to yourself and know that you're going to hold yourself with a space of compassion and grace and gentleness when things are really hard? Think about like when you're having a hard time and you turn to a friend who's really kind, how that really feels like a warm hug. You want to start to embrace what that would look like for yourself, how you can really nurture responding to yourself, that inner child, these different parts of yourself differently. Tip number 7, this last tip, is that you can start again at any moment. I made that clear through this series, is that at any moment, if you messed up, if you made a mistake, or if you got stuck again, or wow, it's been months since you've been practicing skills, or wow, your anxiety has really gotten the best of you, or something else has happened in your life, you have an opportunity to choose to start again, whatever that means or looks like for you, right? Even if it is a very, very small start, that's a start, or whatever change is going to be helpful for you in this moment, whether it's how do you respond differently internally to yourself, or how you do different action and behavior that I could see, but there's an opportunity to start again. Ultimately, I really want you to embrace also this concept that being human, right, that there's going to be so many different challenges and joys that you have in this life, and how do you want to show up to these different moments of your life, and that every time you ask that question, which you can ask that question any single moment of your life, is an opportunity for you to do something different. I know I shared a ton of information in this video series because my hope was to give you a lot of skills and tools that you could really start to change your relationship with the anxiety and really have a better life. I mean, not to sound cliche, I want that for you, and I want you to have the skills that could help you get there. If you found this series helpful, go sign up for my email newsletter. Check out how in my description below, because that's really where I try to share the most information, any tips, tools, recommendations, worksheets that I create. I always make sure that my email newsletter has it. So go check out how to sign up below. And like I always say, I encourage you to continue nurturing your mind, body, and soul, whatever that looks like for you. Thanks, guys.